What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome back to the Dapper Snapper Gaming channel, and welcome back to another Wi-Fi battle. Now, it is not Wi-Fi Wednesday, it is actually Fail Friday. So this week, I wanted to show off a bonus battle for you all, and this battle right here is one of the funniest endings that I've ever had in a battle, and so I really wanted to show you all. So this is not actually going to be a live battle like what they normally are, because the camera footage for me actually did get corrupted, and so it didn't exactly work out. So I'm doing this as a post-commentated battle. These are going to be this is a little awkward just because of how there's no replay system in Sword and Shield, anything like that. So it's a little different, but it'll be just fine. So make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. This battle was pretty hilarious, and so I really think that you're going to like it. If you haven't seen a Fail Friday before, basically what these are is battles that just didn't make the cut for Wi-Fi Wednesday, and so for this battle in particular, this was for last week's episode when we were looking for a battle for the Blaziken team, and that team will of course be in the description below, as well as a link to that previous video, and I'll probably throw it up in the icon above for you as well. But it's featuring Protective Pads Blaziken. Basically it protects you from any kind of contact moves. We also have screens, we have terrain extender on Tapu Lele. Basically the whole team is based around Blaziken, right? Except that Blaziken really doesn't end up doing much this battle, just spoiler alert, but it's really funny nonetheless. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So looking at team preview here, I see just all out offense plus sticky webs, which is actually very common nowadays. I see it all the time, actually, on Showdown. You should expect to see teams similar to this. Obviously, Dracovish is banned, and so you won't see that, but these others are decently common to see, and so it's very, very scary to deal with, right? So we're gonna lead with our Aerodactyl here, and the biggest reason that we're leading Aerodactyl is because of the taunt. So we do carry taunt on that. Now I am also expecting that the Shuckle is going to carry the Mental Herb. That's what most of them carry, and so that actually will end up negating the taunt the first time. Webs really aren't that big of a deal for the team, in my opinion. I don't think they're that big of a problem, especially with Blaziken. It just clicks Endure and just keeps boosting its speed, so it's not that big of a problem. As long as we can keep rocks off the field, that's kind of the bigger problem. So we're just gonna go ahead and click Taunt first turn. Very easy first turn to click against a Shuckle. Any kind of taunted Shuckle is a very good Shuckle. Same thing with Encore if you get that, but that's also very, very rare. But so yeah, this Suicide Lead Aerodactyl is great for going up against a Shuckle like this, and usually these things carry like 3 to 4 non-attacking moves, so it pretty much shuts them down entirely. So that's something that I'm very much a fan of, and so here we go. We're going to go ahead and go for the taunt, but we're not going to see Mental Herb activate. So now I'm wondering, okay, so this has to be something else. It could be leftovers because we haven't done any damage to it. Could be something else, but usually there's not a lot of other options as far as what the item is on a Shuckle. We're gonna find out later what it is, and it's kind of hilarious. It's part of what makes this battle funny at the end. But so we're going to go ahead and set rocks here. Rocks are definitely our best option. We don't really have to predict anything that's coming in. It really doesn't make any difference what comes in here, honestly. My opponent doesn't have any kind of removal, and so we can just go ahead and get the rocks up and start doing some chip damage to everything that wants to come in. So my opponent decides to go into Nidoking. I'm expecting Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, something like that to go ahead and take this thing down to its sash, so I'm not really all that concerned. This thing is just a suicide lead ultimately, so I'm not too concerned about this thing being taken out, especially by a Nidoking, because that'll just give me a free switch into Victini, which can just go ahead and knock that out. So it's really, again, this thing isn't that big of a problem for this team. Also Tapu Lele can deal with it as long as we're faster, and so again, not that big of a problem, so I'm not too concerned about this. But you know, my opponent is probably going to click the electric move or the ice move, and so Klefki is super, super safe, and that is exactly what we are going to go for. He's definitely not going to click Earth Power on a against an Aerodactyl. That doesn't seem like it makes much sense, but my opponent goes for Toxic Spikes, which is literally the worst move that my opponent could have clicked. Toxic Spikes completely shuts down the Blaziken strat because we don't actually carry removal on this team. So this is why Blaziken doesn't really get to do much, because we never can get to full power on our reversal because of the Toxic Spikes. We don't have any way to heal off the Toxic, and we don't have any way to get them off the field. So they're there to stay. Unfortunate. So yeah, it makes it a lot harder here because our star of the show is now completely useless. Maybe not completely useless, but extremely useless. So that's very unfortunate. So my opponent goes for Leer here, which I thought was extremely odd. So we've got Toxic Spikes and Leer. Very odd, but that seems to indicate that he's physical. And so there's a lot of different kinds of coverage, at least on a physical set, that you wouldn't really run. And so it makes me feel a lot safer switching out and not necessarily staying in. Klefki really does need to stay healthy in this battle. It's pretty crucial in my opinion. I really like Klefki in this match. So as you can see, I'm taking just a minute to decide here, but we're gonna ultimately go with Tapu Lele just because I don't expect him to go for any kind of a poison move facing a Klefki. That doesn't really make any sense at all. So we're just gonna go ahead and switch straight into our Tapu Lele. I know it's weird switching into a fairy on a poison type, but it's really a very safe switch given what we were on before. So I'm not too awfully concerned about it. So my opponent is, though, after the Psychic Surge, is definitely going to click it again. So again, very odd that it's running Leer. So we've had two layers of Toxic Spikes and 2 Leers, one of them on this Tapu Lele. But we've got Psyshock, and Psyshock is going to just absolutely decimate this thing. I definitely do not mind staying in and just knocking it out. We're guaranteed faster, except that it's Sash. And so I'm expecting a Poison Jab to just ruin our entire lives here, but he actually clicks Mega Horn rather than the Poison Jab, and it doesn't do very much at all. And that's at -1 defense as well. So the damage is quite low for a Nidoking, which is very, very odd. But we're gonna go ahead and click the Psyshock here and go ahead and knock that out. So Nidoking out of the way, what could have been a very big threat. The set seems to indicate that it really wasn't that big of a threat, but still very, very scary at the same time, if not properly dealt with. Now, our Lele is super low though, and so while it is a weird set, it's going to do a ton of damage over the course of the match. So Shuckle comes right back in here, which is the optimal play for my opponent. I have no way to stop the webs from going up here. There is absolutely nothing I can do to stop it. So that's, again, really great play on my opponent, bringing that in for the free switch. Can't really stop it, unfortunately. So we are gonna switch out here. Aerodactyl, again, can stop it from setting up rocks, at least, from having 3 types of hazards, which could be extremely difficult to deal with. Even with weird sets, it could be difficult to deal with all 3 of those hazards up. So I definitely want to go ahead and at least mitigate what I can and do at least some kind of damage control. So we're going to click Taunt again here. I don't care if he switches out, I just need to be safe here, and Taunt is the safest play. My opponent does switch, which is a great switch, and goes out into Mr. Fish. Mr. Fish obviously being a reference to Wolfie Glick, saying thank you, Mr. Fish. It's quite the meme in the Pokemon community. If you haven't seen it, it's quite a meme. It's a good meme. But so yeah, this is Mr. Fish, the Dracovish, actually an Uber, and it's very strong, especially clicking Fish's Rend. It does tons of damage. At this point, I just kind of realized that with the Sticky Web up, that Tailwind actually could give me a little bit of value. This is the only battle that I've actually ever clicked Tailwind on. Every other battle, I just never really clicked it, but this time I did, and I think that it really helped out here. I think it's kind of clutch. Tailwind is extremely unusual to see on a singles team. It's very common in VGC, but extremely unusual in singles just because it's hard to get a lot of value out of it, just because games last for a lot longer in this game, in this type of battles, rather than in VGC, where they could last just a few turns and Tailwind lasts the entire match. Where this one, it only lasts for a very small portion. So getting that off there even at -1, I know that Kyurem is guaranteed to outspeed even if the Dracovish is scarfed. And that is what I'm really focused on. Now, on a Sticky Web team, it's more likely that this thing is going to be choice banded, just because, you know, the speed advantage is there with the Sticky Web to help it out with its very lackluster speed. But I know that I can outspeed it either way. So this is a very safe switch in for me. Now here, in my opinion, I make a slight misplay. I think the safer play was to just click the freeze dry, but Draco covers everything switching in, minus the Mimikyu. But taking this KO, it allows the Mimikyu in for free and allows it to set up a Swords Dance, which could be very bad. So again, it's one of those where I think it could be considered a misplay, but at the same time, it's also covering any other switch in. And you're really not going to just switch in a Mimikyu here to just have its disguise broken for no value at all. So it's a somewhat safe assumption. If I were my opponent, I definitely would not have switched my Mimikyu in right there. I would have expected freeze dry. And so I think it was fine. It covered everything, really. It covered pretty much everything. So here we're going to see a Mimikyu, and as you can see, I am going to be whiting out the nickname of this thing. I do not support the nickname that this thing has. It is the name of a service that actually sells shinies to people, and I do not support any of that, so I apologize for the clunky bars and stuff everywhere covering the nickname, but I do not support this service that sells shinies to people and taking advantage of people. I've said that before, as far as when Pokemon Go has now made it $10 to transfer a Pokemon if you want to do it more than once a week. So yeah, I'm sorry that it looks tacky, but I do not want anyone to even see the name, because I don't want you to go searching for it, because I don't want you to be taken advantage of. I don't support it. So I am going to be covering up that name every time it pops up. It's going to take a lot of time in post, so whatever. I don't mind it, because I don't want you being scammed by anybody like that. So we are going to go ahead and click the foul play on this thing and go ahead and break the disguise. Foul play is going to be doing a decent chunk after we break the disguise, especially once it's gotten this Swords Dance off. So it's going to be really nice. Now it is leftovers, which is interesting because it's not Life Orb. Typically these things are Life Orb just to boost their power even more, but we're going to get a free Reflect off here, which is going to be really, really nice as far as mitigating the damage. Our Psychic Terrain has disappeared, so it is free to click the Shadow Sneak now if it needs to. So that is one thing to keep in mind, that if something is super low, I can't really bring it in on this because it can go for that priority. Now I do want to go ahead and slow this thing down though, because late game it will be nice to be able to outspeed it with everything on the team, especially Kyurem. Especially Kyurem being at -1, the Thunder Wave is going to actually be super, super clutch as far as mitigating any kind of damage and making sure that Kyurem can go first, because that's going to be my main sweeper at the end of the game. So that's kind of the end game that I'm shooting for, is a Kyurem sweep rather than a Blaziken one, because the Blaziken one just isn't going to work out. So here I go ahead and set up another screen. I don't know whether this thing is going to be physical or special, because Victini can literally do anything, but it gets fully paralyzed, which is very, very fortunate for me. So now we get to click foul play here, and if it is a physical Victini, this should just OHKO, but it does not. So that leads me to believe that this thing actually is special, and we see that in the blue flare. We do live it though through light screen, which kind of blew my mind. I did not expect to live that at all. I really, really thought that it was going to take me out through the screens, because we are physically defensive, not specially defensive, but that is going to take out the Victini, which is absolutely fantastic. Victini is a huge, huge threat, and it's a very, very strong one. I haven't actually used the special set this gen yet. I've been using exclusively the physical set. So in comes the nickname that shall not be named, the Mimikyu. So I just hate that such a good mon has such a terrible nickname. But we're gonna go ahead and just slow this thing down too. We do see the Shadow Sneak here to take our last 12, except that we live on 2. It only does 10. So this thing is just so good. Klefki is so nice. So we slow this thing down too. It was a really good check to our Kirim, and now it is very slow, so Kirim can do a ton of damage to it. It's not very bulky, so it's very nice to be able to live that. Now Klefki actually still has some value here because of the Prankster. Prankster is very interesting, right? Because it makes you where you don't actually have to have an X amount of HP to be useful, because taking hits really aren't that important because you can always go first. So I can either get one or the other of the screens, or I could get off a Thunder Wave against my opponent, which will be very useful. We see the full para there. That could have been bad if my opponent switched to Shadow Claw, but it's more likely that my opponent went for the Shadow Sneak, and that's why I went into Tapu Lele, because it will block the Shadow Sneak because no priority in Psychic Terrain. So I was going into that to block the Shadow Sneak, so it made it a free switch. I get to save my Klefki for either Depth Fodder or for screen support late game if I need it. It's definitely a decent option for late game, and we take it down to just barely any health. My opponent does remember the terrain, and so goes ahead and goes for that and knocks out my Tapu Lele. That would have been the time that I probably would have forgotten about Psychic Terrain, to be honest with you, but that is good. My opponent does remember, and so takes out my thing through the Reflect, mind you. It's a very strong move. So now I'm deciding what I want to go into. Klefki obviously is pretty free if I wanted to do that, but I don't really get a lot of value out of that, just because I set up a screen and then go right back down, so it doesn't really help me there, and it's all about getting value out of every turn, right? So we go into our Ditto here, and so what we're going to do is just go ahead and click the Shadow Claw. Our speed is going to fall, but that doesn't matter because we are going to copy the exact stats of my opponent. It counts as any kind of boosts, any kind of drops, anything like that. So we're going to click the Shadow Claw. We are scarfed, so we are guaranteed faster no matter what because this thing's paralyzed. My opponent goes for the Shadow Sneak, but it wouldn't have done any damage because of the Psychic Terrain, and we are going to be able to go ahead and take out this thing. So I don't have to do any more boxes of editing. So thank goodness we take this thing out. It's gone. We're good. So we are scarfed currently into the Shadow Claw, and my opponent decides now to switch into the Melmetal. And so obviously Melmetal is a huge threat to this now Mimikyu, and Shadow Claw is doing nowhere near enough damage. But so my opponent only has Shuckle and Melmetal left. At some point my opponent should have sacked Shuckle, but decided to keep it around. So now I decide to go ahead and use my Klefki as death fodder. It's not useful anymore. Setting screens really isn't that big of a deal. Worst comes to worst, I can just go into my Blaziken and get a Blaze Kick off, and that'll do a good chunk of damage, and I can finish it off with Kirim. Kirim most likely just OHKOs this as long as it's not Assault Vest. So, because we are specs, I mean, we do a ton of damage to this thing. So either way, we have ways to deal with it, and Shuckle isn't doing any damage. So all I have to do is take out this, and I'm fine. So the end game is in sight. It all makes sense. Even at -1 speed, even if that Melmetal was max speed, I don't think it could be anywhere near touching the speed of Kirim. And Kirim's really not particularly fast. So it's kind of funny that that it even got that way, but it's fine. So we go ahead and go for the Earth Power. It is absolutely not Assault Vest and just goes down in one hit. The special defense on Melmetal is mediocre at best. Physical defense, very good. Special defense, not nearly as good. So we are able to just go ahead and take that out with a Specs Earth Power, and I'm absolutely fine with that. And last but not least, okay, sort of least, comes in the Shuckle. And so, you know, my opponent and I both know it's over. I'm just gonna click the Earth Power here just to get just as much damage as I can, and I should be able to just 2-hit KO this thing. It shouldn't be an issue at all. And here's where the battle turns just a little bit weird. It's funny. So we hit the 3-minute mark. This battle obviously goes to time because, you know, every battle goes to time. I'm looking at you, Game Freak. You should fix it. We've made a video about it. If you want to see that, it's up in the iCard above. yeah, we've talked about how bad the timer is. But anyway, so we go for Earth Power here. And I know it's not going to KO, Shuckle's too bulky for that. And we see the Shuckle's item, and it is Red Card, which is interesting to say the least, but also not too bad, right? So what that does is, you know, you attack the Shuckle, you're definitely faster than Shuckle, and you attack into it, and you get yourself switched out, and you don't get to stop the entry hazards. So Red Card is not a bad item at all, but it doesn't prevent taunt. So on Wi-Fi, it makes sense to me why he would do it on Wi-Fi. And so we see Stealth Rock, Gastro Acid, Sticky Web, and Struggle Bug. So now we see the Dynamaxing Shuckle, the absolute win condition right here. The Dynamaxing Shuckle. Now I have faced this person before in the in Wi-Fi battles. I don't know if they ever made it on the channel or not, and usually his teams are a little bit better than this, and goes for the max guard, which I think is just hilarious that it went for it in the first place. And I said, well, you know what? You know, I'm poisoned. It's the last few turns. I gotta preserve my 3-0. I gotta preserve my 3-0 here, right? So we're gonna match that Dynamax right there. So we have got dueling Dynamaxing Shuckles, and this, like, I wish I still had the footage of this, because it was just me losing it, because this is just so funny that we had two Shuckles on the field, just the biggest boys going as hard as they can on each other. And by that I mean we've got max Flutterby, right? And here we go, 230 to 223. He did 7 damage to my Shuckle and lowers my special attack. And so we're gonna hit him right back with a big max Flutterby, and it moved barely. So probably did also about 7. So this is how it ends. This is how our battle ends, is a Shuckle off for just seeing who can be the better Shuckle. And honestly, it couldn't have gone any better. This could not have been a better end game. Just two Shuckles going nuts on each other, and by going nuts I mean doing absolutely 0 damage. So yeah, that is that's gonna be an ending and a half for you. I think that this was a hilarious battle as far as the ending. Obviously the sets weren't optimal on my opponent's team, and that's why this is on a Fail Friday. I do put the weird sets and ones that don't really make a whole lot of sense. I do put these in the Fail Friday, and so I hope you guys enjoyed watching whatever that ending was there at the end. I think it's hilarious, and it worked out fantastic. We don't get to find out if I would have KO'd it there. I honestly don't know. I feel like it would have lived that hit right there, and then we would have been able to take it out the following turn, but still really, really funny. So I hope that you all enjoyed today's Wi-Fi battle, and yeah, so go ahead and make sure and leave a like on the video if you haven't already, and subscribe if you haven't already. We are so close to 200 subscribers, and I appreciate all of you who have already come out and subscribed, who have been at our streams on Sundays, who have been at all of these things. I really, really appreciate you. Also, please keep Snappy Bear, my wife, in your thoughts this weekend. She is getting her wisdom teeth taken out today, so she needs all of your thoughts and prayers. So go ahead and hit us up in the comments below for that as well. So I hope you all have an amazing weekend. We will see you Sunday night for another stream, and until then, stay safe out there. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.